I just want to give an overview first, and thank you so much for coming. The class, it's abstract algebra. The problem, I was giving ineffective lectures, at least from my perspective. I believe from the students' perspective as well. So a solution I tried was students lead class, and the results, any measure I could imagine was much better for me and the students. In the future, I believe I'd continue in a similar manner, but now I keep hearing things here at this conference. I want to try other things as well. And my understanding was to give a demonstration, so we'll give a demonstration. I'll give you a chance to step out if you don't want any chance of being called on, come to the front. But I just want to mention briefly why I'm here. Last summer, I gave a very similar talk, and a friend of mine who's familiar with this conference, he told me, "You're doing IBL, you should come to this conference." So I'm new to IBL, but my friend told me it was, so I hope the IBL in the title is appropriate. So as an undergraduate, taught last 5 consecutive years, so one section each year, around 12 students each time. Mostly mathematics education majors, but we did have some math majors and some who have gone on to grad school. Used Gallien's Contemporary Abstract Algebra, the first half, so introduction to groups and rings. And the problem, my first 3 years, I did what I knew, which was lecture. That's all really I'd ever seen as a student. And I tried different out-of-class assignments, thinking perhaps that would make it better, but most of my students felt lost as far as I could tell. And I felt like ultimately I was pushing students away, which is so hard because I love abstract algebra. So I'm like, surely there's a better way. So I started thinking, I've got to do something different. I'm wondering if some of you are like, it took you 3 years? Well, I mean, I tried some things, but anyway, so I was like, I need a better solution here. So I had heard of Moore method. I had a friend in grad school. He had been taught using the Moore method in Texas, and it was very intriguing to me. I sat in on a colleague's class where lecture was rare. This was key. I sat in the whole semester because I kept hearing good things about this class from a lot of students, and so this was very good for me to see, a class where there was barely any lecture, and it was very effective. And this is sort of a small thing, but it really stuck in my head. Just at a math conference, somebody said once they rolled a die to determine like what student would present. So the students have no idea, right, until you roll the die type idea. This was revolutionary for me. I'm hesitant to call on students. Maybe I don't like people calling me, but I just like, the accountability measure. Maybe there's something to that. So my initial thoughts. I had to do something drastic. After those 3 years, I was like, it's got to be better. It's got to be able to be better. I want students to see the beauty, to appreciate it, at least more so than what I'm seeing. So I decided it had to be something between lecture and Moore method. From what I heard of the Moore, I guess the traditional Moore method, I didn't feel like I was ready to fully embrace that, at least at that time. And so I was like, maybe, okay, and I just wanted the students to really wrestle with the proofs. I know it sounds like IBL, a lot of times they construct their own proofs. I just wanted them to understand the proofs in the book. That was my main goal, and perhaps I should have even higher goals now, but that was my goal. I just wanted them to really have a structure, support them into really wrestling with it, and through the content, understand it. So just some overview of changes that I started off with. Altered most of the syllabus, scrapped all my slide presentations. And I still had at least half of the final grade coming from exams, and a significant part now from class presentations, just to tell the students, hey, this is important, okay? 20% 2012, this past year increased to 30%. The rest of grade, primarily homework. Okay, so the class presentations, this is the key thing. The point values in the syllabus, I gave the definitions, proofs, and examples. I listed all of them in my syllabus and said, here's how many points. A small definition versus a huge proof, different points, what they could be worth if I called on you. And I had the student study material in pairs. I knew I'd have some students that if they just tried by themselves, it just wouldn't go anywhere, but I was hoping pairs could possibly work. And so this is before the class. So beforehand, I decide who presents what. And throughout the semester, I attempt balance. So all the students having about the same number of theorems and proofs, definitions, and examples. Okay, and since students do not know class plan beforehand, all the students prepare for all the material, that rolling the die idea. And I just need that accountability measure. And I was a little concerned, actually, how apprehensive students would be. But it actually, since they were all in the same boat, it worked out pretty well. And so another thing, so I had them in pairs, and I'm like, well, I could have them present in pairs, but it was just so important to me to have that individual ownership and accountability. So I decided to, definitions, they came up by themselves, had them memorize definitions. But for examples and proofs, I had them come up in a pair, but I said which one was the primary presenter. And they were responsible for the presentation, but they had somebody right there beside them that they could have a resource or encouragement, or if they get stuck. And I feel like that's, well, I'll tell you about it. I think they worked well. So, and this is just a side note. I'm really wrestling with assessment. I get the impression that there's no one perfect form of assessment. And so I'm really wrestling with this. I'm like, if I'm really totally changing how classes are, assessment should probably change as well. And so I was just trying something different this past year. And I had an oral portion of exams. Like, if they have to orally present all the time, I want to assess, focusing on that. And so just this past year, just again, this is a side note. I've not polished by any means, but I just met individually with students. I wanted a cumulative assessment of class presentation, not just each class, but after 5 weeks or so. Now you come to me, and you need to be ready for any stuff that's showed up the last 5 weeks that you're supposed to present in class. 15 minutes for each exam, 30 minutes for final. And that wasn't the whole portion. I actually had an online portion and challenging in class. That challenging in class ended up being too challenging, but so I still needed to tweak. So the results. So I tried out this solution. What are my results? At first, I was a little scared. I remember that first day. And really, all I had done is lecture. So I sat in the back, and I'm thinking, oh man, what's going to happen here? But overall, students quickly cooperative. Again, once they knew, the very first day of class, I led, and I told them what's going to happen. The very second day, though, I had sat in the back, had the students, I called them up, they went up and they presented, and they were all in the same boat, they were together. I felt like I found my role quickly. I was a little concerned about that too, because I felt very different from me. So results, typical classes. Support persons, I felt worked well. And this was so great. My first 3 years, this rarely happened. This was every class. Wonderful, deep questions. The students were presenting, the students were asking questions. They were figuring it out together. Just trying to understand the proofs. And the students really got into it. It was, oh my goodness. Just that very first class, I was like, why didn't I try this earlier? Compared to the first 3 years in my lecture. They were really getting into it. I was just so excited. The hands-off with guided questions. I felt worked for me well. So as I said, I sat in the back, and I tried to hold off as much as possible and only give a guided question. I feel like everybody's totally stuck. How I would assess this from positive student feedback, from when I asked them with the oral exams and also anonymous feedback. We had official student evaluations with ID. It was much better. It was mid-range, but before it was like the lowest. And I feel like mid-range is decent at least, but maybe I should even hire a goal here. But my division chair really liked it, so that's always nice. And evidence every class. The students were interested. They are showing appreciation, understanding, and unity as a class. And I think really having them, in their pairs and working together and a support person. And they were having fun. It's very important to me to have the rigorous understanding, but they were in fun. That's great. And so in the future, last 2 years, I feel like I've worked. So in some ways to say, why fix if it's not broken? But I'm definitely being challenged more as I'm at this. This is my first time at the conference and hearing more things to think about, and so I'm excited about that. Lower out of class time expectation. I feel like I had way too much at first, and I've lowered it some, but I'm a little concerned. Some students are saying they're spending 30, 40 hours a week, something. That's definitely lower now, but I need just work on that. Continue to tweak structure of exams, and I wonder if to make the most efficient use of class time, I think I let the students sometimes flounder a little too much. I know I was at a workshop just this morning with Mike Starbird, and he was just saying to not let them flounder too much during class session. And the students have helped me to see that this past semester, and I think I'm doing better. I didn't want to continue to grow in that. And it's easy for me to push to right to the end of the time limit, right, to get as much stuff in. But I want to do a 5-minute wrap-up at the end of class to really try to pull things together and give them just a deeper perspective, nothing else, like another question that just goes deeper into connections. And I do want to eventually try something closer to the Moore method, and I'm more and more convinced of that as I'm at this conference. And I just want to mention a colleague of mine. So will I teach the 6th consecutive year? No, actually another algebraist came to my school. It's very fun. So she's teaching this fall, but she's very excited about IBL. She's actually using an IBL textbook. It's new, it just came out this year. I think the first author is Hodge. And so I'm excited to see how that goes with my colleague, and so I have somebody to talk with, and we'll continue to grow. Okay, so my demonstration. So the demonstration, I wasn't sure what level of material, but just introductory topic for abstract algebra, but perhaps maybe just to see a little bit more of what it's like. I was going to give a demonstration. And so my demonstration, first, I was going to make it as much as possible like it is in my class. So we'll just have signed pairs. We'll just have like here, have a pair, it'd be a pair, and you go maybe with the person behind you, a pair, and the back row, a pair, and you can go over here. Is that okay? And then a pair, and a pair. No? Oh, okay. Okay. And a pair. Yeah, pair. Good. Is everybody who's willing to come up to the front in a pair? Oh yeah, I was supposed to give you a chance. Anybody want to run out of the room who does not want to come up, be called on? Because I'm just going to call on. You won't know who I will call on, right? That's part of it. Okay, then pass out handout. So let's see. Does anyone mind? You mind helping? Just pass these out on that side. I'll pass it on this side. Actually, yes, one per group. I don't think I have enough for each individual person. I think we'll pass it around. And we'll do one per group. Oh, okay. Let's, just for time's sake, I won't ask you to memorize the definition. Just focus on the example, okay? And so just talk about the example in your group, and I'll just give a few minutes, and I'm going to call on one of you all to come up to the front to give the example and be prepared for at least 2 leading questions. Fair enough? Okay, we'll give just a few minutes. Start presentations. Okay. We'll take about 1 more minute. We'll go ahead into the presentation mode, and pick on somebody in the front. Is it Justin? Yeah. Justin, please come to the board and present this example. Yes, you don't have to present the definition, just the example. So just go through the example, and please have 2 leading questions for the class. And so, in fact, part of your example could be the class. And sometimes my students, maybe you could say abuse this, but ask something they don't totally understand. But it's but ultimately it gets good discussion. So.
All right, so I guess we've talked about the definition of the order of an element of a group, and so we're going to look at one specific group. We're familiar with the group Z10. Let me ask you guys, so what is Z10? And do I stop there? And that's because... Oh, yes. Because 10's equivalent to 0. Okay. So then we want to think about the order of the element 2. So how would we do that? I guess. Do you remember the definition? 2 plus 2 plus 2, some number of times, is going to give us 0. So I guess we'll just start adding multiples of 2 and see what happens. And so 1 times 2 is equal to 2. And 2 times 2 is equal to 2 plus 2. I don't know, do we care if we use additive or multiplicative notation? I guess that's 4. And then 3 times 2. Do we want to do all the steps or should we skip some? So how many do we need? I take 5 times 2, which is 2 plus 2 plus, well, we get 0. And we believe that any previous multiple doesn't give us 0. So then we can say that the order, remember we use those straight lines to sort of symbolize the order of a group, is equal to 5, because that's how many copies we need to add to itself to get back to 0.
Okay, and for time's sake, just quickly, just the example of leading question, I could say 10 times 2, add 2 to itself 10 times to get back to 0. Why isn't the order 10?
Well, I think because we want the smallest number that would give us 0.
That's something, I don't know about y'all, my students miss that all the time. Right, the smallest positive integer. Give Justin a hand. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, class. Thank you very much, Justin. Are there any questions?
Hussein Al-Turki, University of Oklahoma. What did you mean by leading questions? Because we thought about something different.
Oh, okay. I apologize for the ambiguity. I mean a question for the class. So I could have actually just put questions. Perhaps the leading question is actually more appropriate for me as the professor if they're not understanding something and I need to hopefully lead them to a particular place. But as a student, I hope for them to grow into a particular place of seeing a difficult concept and helping the class to build up to that, but not by telling them directly, but leading them to that.
Nissa and I, in our group, came up with a leading question. Under what condition is the order of the number equal to the order of the group? In other words, in this particular example, what makes the order equal to 10?
Yes, that's an excellent leading
What condition
question.
does that happen?
I agree.
And we'll let the audience answer that.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds good. Well, thank you. Is there...
I'm Amanda Kroll from Concordia University. I know you mentioned for the definitions, you want them to memorize the definitions.
Yes.
For the examples and the theorems, do you allow them to take notes up to the board when they go to present?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yes, especially because this is definitely, I'd say, one of the less involved examples. I would say most of the examples of proofs are a lot of subtleties, a lot of gaps to fill in.
Yeah, I have a question too. Hi, my name is Fred Butler. So I'm just wondering, what are the students like working from? Are you have sheets like for each module of the class with
sure.
like where the definitions and examples? Or are you working from a textbook or something different?
I'm working from the Galleon's textbook.
Okay, so you're still using that even with the IBL approach.
Yes, I have. Yes,
Okay.
and but if I did the class again, I'd be interested in trying something different.
Okay.
Hi, Jeb Collins. I actually have a couple of questions. First, what assignments do they have to kind of learn the material? Is it just read the textbook, or do you have some pre-recorded lectures or something like that? And the other question was simply, how well does the pair thing work? Like this example right here, the second guy didn't do much.
Oh my goodness.
How does that really work?
I'm so sorry. I was supposed to bring up your support person. That was very key. I'm so sorry, Justin. You didn't have your support person. That's my bad. I apologize. I was totally going to do that.
But so in the real class, like how well does it work? How does it work? Does he really help support, or is he just up there in case the first person flounders and needs a little bit of help?
They really do support. And I felt like that the primary presenter would not just get everything from their support person. They understood it was them, but sometimes there was a little subtlety they'd want to ask them about, or they get stuck and they can talk about it with them. So okay. I felt like it worked well.
And so for the material, do you use pre-recorded lectures or just read this?
I don't. I just ask them to read it. And that right there is a challenge for most students. I have had maybe 1 or 2 students that were, I guess, geniuses or whatnot, that were just like, oh, this is great, this is easy, why are we doing this in class? But most of the students, it was wrestling and learned a lot during class, wrestling with the material the rest of class.
Tom Judson, Stephen F. Austin. You said you gave an oral exam?
Oh, that was part of my exams.
Yes.
I had an oral component.
Can you comment on the structure of that oral component?
It was basically just like the classes, except it was just me and one student. But I could ask them to present any definition, theorem, or proof. So actually, they didn't have the support people for the oral part. So. Oh, for the proofs and examples, they were still allowed notes. Even during the exam. And that was still, because of the amount of material, it was very challenging for most students.